Welcome everybody. This is the ArcGIS Online Intro to ArcGIS Online workshop. Button's not working. There we go. A little bit about us and our organization at the start here. We are members of the Informatics and GIS statewide program under the University of California's Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And probably most of you, just looking at the roster, are very familiar with ANR and the UC in general. We are kind of like the public outreach and education branch of the university, dealing with getting research out there to people in local communities and stuff like that. We have cooperative extension offices in every county up and down the state, as well as some 9, I believe, research and extension centers, and also some affiliated campuses where we all are based and do our work. And there are a number of statewide programs like us, wrong button, including probably a lot of people are familiar with 4-H, the CalFresh program, IPM, and those are who we are. The IGIS group itself, this is kind of an old slide. I probably should have edited this one first. This is our whole team, a few of whom are not here, and actually we are missing our newest member as well on this slide. I'm Robert Johnson. I am based out of one of our research and extension centers, the Kearney Agricultural Research and Extension Center near Fresno. I will be doing the intro here to give you some background information on ArcGIS Online and the Esri software environment. Sean Hogan, who is based out of the ANR headquarters up in Davis, will be doing the main branch of this workshop, the walkthrough part. We also have with us Maggie Kelly, our director, who is based out of UC Berkeley, as well as Ben Satzman, who is also at Berkeley. They'll be monitoring the chat, answering any questions you have. And as I mentioned before, not on this slide, our newest member is Noah Stars. She'll also be here in the background. She is also at Berkeley, as well as Ben and Maggie. And then not appearing in this particular workshop today are our 2 other members, Shane Fire and Andy Lyons. Now, for who you are, as you can see from the map here, you're spread out all around California. And like I was saying earlier when we were looking at the roster, this is a pretty UC heavy group today. What we'd like you to do, we do this at the beginning of all of our workshops, is just in the chat, give us a brief rundown of what you would like to learn in this workshop, and also your experience level with ArcGIS Online, going from 1 absolute beginner to 5, you are an expert. So if you go ahead and start rolling that into the chat. Oh, Maggie, solid 3. Got some 1s, that's good. You're definitely in the right place. Learn some fundamentals. Well, we will definitely be covering that as well. All right, very cool. Ooh, archaeology research. A lot of 1s, a lot of 2s. That's good. 3 to 5, depending on the day. Sean, I feel you on that one. All right, that's great. Keep those rolling in. It's great to see what you all are here for and hoping to get out of this. And we hope we can give you a good workshop that gives you a solid grounding in these technologies. Okay. So a brief outline of what we're going to be going over in this workshop today. I'll be doing the introduction here, like I mentioned, introducing you to WebGIS as a concept in general, the Esri environment in particular, why you should or could use ArcGIS Online, some important core concepts and design considerations to factor in when you are working with this software. And then I'll turn it over to Sean for the meat of the workshop, and he's basically going to walk you through the whole process in ArcGIS Online of getting your data, bringing it into a map, and styling it and creating a web application that you can then share from that. So first, a little bit about Esri and web maps versus web apps. So Esri is the company who makes the ArcGIS software suite. They are kind of like the 500-pound gorilla in the commercial GIS software world. And here we have a few examples of some different apps and web maps that you can create using this software. So, we have a web map we created of ANR employees across the state of California, an app, which is a story map that was a virtual tour of the ANR system that we created for leadership. There's another app up in the corner, which I believe comes from CAL FIRE. It's a fire perimeter web app. And then also the very popular and famous COVID dashboard that Johns Hopkins University created out at the beginning of the pandemic. And these are all things that you can do in the ArcGIS Online environment. So differences between what is a web map, what is a web app. The basic way to think of it is a web map is, sort of your base for creating a map with geospatial data. You can have a web map and you don't need to also, then create a web application from that. But if you are going to create a web application, you're always going to start with a web map. And a web map will allow you to bring in data, do some basic mapping stuff like, symbology, labels, things like that. But it's a little bit limited and doesn't have a lot of analysis capabilities. They've brought in quite a few into the ArcGIS Online environment now, but still not as robust as like a desktop software. Whereas your web applications are going to take that map and create something that's a bit more graphically appealing, gives you a greater range of layout options and other things like widgets that you can bring in and do stuff with the data in the map. Examples are story maps and dashboards. Also, there are smartphone apps that you can use. Esri has some nice ones for like data collection as well. And they often are kind of look like a standalone web page, but they are created in this case through ArcGIS Online without any sort of coding backend that you need to do yourself. Okay, so a little history of ArcGIS Online. Before ArcGIS Online really came about, GIS was the realm of people like me and the rest of the IGIS group working on specialized software on a desktop machine. There wasn't an easy way to find data, to bring data in, to do your mapping if you did not have that specialized software, a machine capable of running it, and the requisite training and experience. After ArcGIS came out in 2012, which I can't believe it's already been 11 years. That's crazy. It really opened up GIS to a much wider audience. Anybody can use this. All you need is a computer with a web browser. And I mean, it doesn't even need to be a desktop machine. You can theoretically use this software on a tablet, on a smartphone. Smartphone might not be the best just because it's a very small screen, but it's got those capabilities. So why use ArcGIS Online? You might want to create web maps and apps, and this is a very easy, straightforward environment to do that in. And the one real advantage that we've found of ArcGIS Online in their system, as I was talking about back in the days of pre-online GIS, a large portion of doing any GIS project was just finding data. ArcGIS Online has over the last decade or so developed a very robust data environment that you can access through ArcGIS Online, and makes that initial step of getting your data a lot easier. It's not perfect by all means. There still has to be someone out there who has created this data and brought it into the ArcGIS Online system, but it's a lot easier, and it gives you the capability to just get started creating your apps, doing analysis, all of that fun stuff. And really, it's fast, it's intuitive, and it's browser-based so that it's very accessible to just about everybody. Also, there's this integration aspect to ArcGIS Online where you start with the data, which you can get directly from, as I mentioned, the ArcGIS Online environment. They have the Living Atlas, which is a very huge catalog of authoritative data sets that Esri has put together. You can bring in your own data. You can bring in external data from other groups. And most of this stuff, you can search for it and find within the ArcGIS Online environment. Then there's the design piece in the web maps where you can go and take this data that you found, bring it in, style it, give it labels, give it the look you want to tell the story that you want with this map. And then the development side with web apps, either a basic ArcGIS Online web map, story maps, or if you really wanted to get more into it, designing native apps for both a desktop or smartphone, mobile device environment. Oop, too far. Go back. There are several things that ArcGIS Online does not do so well, though. And the big one is just cartographic design. Your options in ArcGIS Online are going to be much more limited than in the desktop software environment like ArcGIS Pro. You can do some basic styling, you can work with labels, but you're not going to have a really nice, like, production quality cartographic map. That's just not something that it does, and it's really not what it's designed for. Projections are also a limiting factor in the online environment. By default, Esri does everything in the web Mercator projection, which is great for a web map. It gives you, you can zoom out to the full earth and get like a full wall-to-wall, fill your screen view on a map. But you really can't get out of that one projection unless you do some background stuff with pulling in a base map that's in a different projection. And analysis is limited, but getting better. They do have a number of pretty good vector data analysis tools, and they've started bringing in some more image processing, spatial modeling. There are now things like Jupyter Notebooks integrated into ArcGIS Online that let you do some Python scripting and do some, like reproducible workflows and things like that. So it's definitely getting better along the analysis front. So some comparisons between the cloud environment in ArcGIS Online and the desktop in ArcGIS Pro. Like I said, the strength of ArcGIS Online is, you can easily create a web map or an app. There's lots of different app templates to choose from, like very popular story maps. There are analysis capabilities, and they're adding stuff all the time. And, it's a fast, intuitive, browser-based environment that anyone can use. And there is a very, very large and extensive data catalog, which, because of the integration between these two platforms, you can use both ways. So you can access data from ArcGIS Online in the desktop environment in ArcGIS Pro, and conversely, you can push data from Pro up into ArcGIS Online. But really, if you're going to be going into the desktop side, it's because you need to have that more control and more of a finer output from your cartographic design. If you need to work with different projections or any sort of advanced analysis, that's really where you want to be. And the desktop environment will require a different license and a desktop machine or laptop machine that is running specifically a 64-bit version of Windows. The one really kind of limiting factor of Esri's desktop software is that it does not work on Mac unless you're booting Windows in the background. And so, like I alluded to before, these are two really integrated systems, and there's the ability to bring data in and out from both the desktop and the online environment, which is really helpful. If you're doing some work in the desktop environment and or you have a good data set up online, you can bring it directly in there from ArcGIS Online. It's a very simple process. And you can also take your own data that you create and push it up to ArcGIS Online for use in the cloud environment. And so on that front, we should talk a little bit about local data formats versus the cloud native formats. On the local side, these are going to be things like geodatabases, shape files. These are both kind of Esri specific file formats. But there's also, raster files, a CSV. If you have either coordinate or address location in your CSV, you can push it in and turn it into a geospatial data set. Whereas in the cloud, you're really oftentimes you're taking those local data formats and bringing them up to your online environment as either a layer or a service, which can then be used in ArcGIS Online, a web map, any number of web applications. But you can also go both ways, as I mentioned before. Like often when you have one of these services, there is also the capability to do a data export then back into one of those local formats like a geodatabase or a shapefile. Okay, and now this brings us to sharing your data and your maps and apps. This is a pretty important step that often you got to think a little bit about how exactly you need to be able to share your data. ArcGIS Online has 3 basic levels of sharing. The default is it's only shared with the owner of the data. So you have pushed this data into ArcGIS Online and only you have access to it. Next, after that, you can share it with the members of your ArcGIS Online organization. That's all the members. Or even further, you can just share it to everyone. Anybody who has like the link to your data can see it. And that can bring up some issues of data privacy, which we'll get into, I think, in one of the next slides. But in addition to those 3 levels, there's also group sharing that kind of works in conjunction with those. And in that case, you create a group within your organization that you add certain people to, and you can either use that as a way of taking a data set and sharing it with only like select individuals within your organization rather than the fuller organization. So you have that default owner sharing set, but then you add some people from a group. Or you can just have it if you have data that's not necessarily so sensitive like that, and you don't mind if other people have access to it, but you want to make it easy for certain people to find, is you add people to a group and then you add all the data there so they can go directly to that group to find the data easily. So here's a kind of basic workflow of building out web maps and apps in the ArcGIS Online environment. You always are starting with data, either something that you yourself are creating and pushing up from the desktop environment, or that is coming directly from ArcGIS Online or the Living Atlas within there. And that's usually going to be a feature layer, which may be one single data set or multiple data sets kind of stacked together. You're going to then take that and bring it into a web map for your styling, your labels, getting everything how you want it to look. And then you can push it to any number of the web app templates that are available, and then share it to your chosen audience. So some design considerations, really not just for web maps, for maps, I'd say in general. Really, you want to focus on who your users and your audience is, and what they are going to need to be able to make sense of this map. A lot of times you're going in, you're getting your data, you're making a map, and you're putting it on the web map and styling it how you like and creating the pop-ups how you like, and it makes sense to you. It might not make sense to other people. So you really need to consider, who is going to be consuming this and what are they going to need to get out of it. Also, the objective of the map. In this case, what is this map going to be used for? Is this going to be a web map? In this case, that's what we're covering here. But there's also, if you're working in the desktop environment, are you going to be creating a map for publication? Are you going to be, doing some other types of stuff? You've got to consider how the actual end use is going to be coming out, and that's going to really affect how your design comes into play. Things about how you need to symbolize your map and what you need to symbolize on the map. You need to think about color schemes, symbol sizes, symbol types. These are all things that you have a really large kind of expanse of things that you can do with the data and the symbology, but you need to definitely decide what's going to be the best way to tell the story that you are trying to tell with your data and your symbology of that data. That gets into what to include and what to leave out. There's a tendency, especially when you're making a web map, to just throw data on there, anything and everything. This is, you want this data, you want that data. And on a web map, it's not as big of an issue because, you can turn layers on and off to your heart's content. But it's not always the best thing to do, is just throw a bunch of, throw the kitchen sink on a map. I know there's something that I've heard from some of, the Esri developers in the past. It's like, you have a map and you say it's going to be a map of this, and then you say, oh, and this, and so on and so on. Every time there's an and, that's a new map. You don't want to put too much stuff on one map, or it just becomes overwhelming and you lose sight of what you're really trying to show there. And then ethical considerations. This gets back to some of the privacy issues I mentioned in the sharing piece. If you have data that has personal identifying information or other sensitive stuff that you may not necessarily have the authority to make public, you should definitely consider that when you're creating your map. You might have to lock it down to a lower sharing level, or oftentimes there are ways to sort of like generalize the data so that you can't see exactly where the data is, but sort of more a fuzzy view of the spatial part of it. So some logistical considerations. When you're bringing in your data, you can either have static data that, it's a fixed data set. It's going to go on there. No new data is going to be added or changed. It's going to be what it is. That's relatively straightforward to deal with. But maybe you also have another data set that's going to be, receiving updates over the course of time. And you need to plan for that. You need to have a way to, reliably update that as new data is coming in. And also there are considerations of, when you first bring the data in, maybe you'll symbolize it to a certain range. If you get new data that's out of that range, it might not show up on your map. So you'll need to go back in and tweak that as well. What kind of data you need, how it's going to be hosted. Is this going to be something that's, just living in ArcGIS Online? Is it going to be something that you have on your own server, separate outside of the cloud system? Is the web map going to be part of an existing website? Then you have to bring in considerations of, styling and colors to match themes between the existing site and your map. And also you have to think about security protocols. If you're trying to bring your data, your map, into an existing website that's not secured with like SSL, it's not going to work because the Esri software requires that in order to share their maps into a new website. Is this going to be something that's going to be on multiple platforms, especially mobile platforms? ArcGIS Online and their pre-configured templates are pretty good at swapping between both a desktop and a smaller tablet or smartphone environment, but that's something you need to consider when you're designing your map. Especially one of the big things is like pop-ups. If you have a pop-up that has just a ton of data fields in it, it's not gonna come across well on a small screen. Things of that nature. Do you need to support offline access? This also comes into the next one about field data collection. Sometimes, and in some of the Esri apps, you'll be out using them to collect data in the field. You might be somewhere where you don't have cell reception. So you're going to need to be able to bring the data onto that device locally. And Esri does have workflows for that. And then once you've collected your data, you can sync it back up when you get somewhere where you have reception. And the other thing, how much programming are you going to require? If you're doing something, solely staying within the ArcGIS Online environment, you don't need to be able to code. It has everything there for you in a graphical interface, a bunch of different templates that work really well. But if you want to go beyond that, you're going to either need to be able to program it yourself, or you're going to have to contract out to someone who can do that programming for you, which comes into how much are you willing to invest into this. So those are all considerations you need to keep in mind. Okay, so here is our wonderful training calendar. So this is the first of our fall workshops. We have several others coming up through the rest of the year here. You can go to our website at igis.ucnr.edu to see the full calendar, to sign up for any of the upcoming workshops. And we also have signups for online office hours, which we do every Monday and Tuesday from 3 to 5. And we also have a data resource page, which comes in handy quite often. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to the workshop section here. Sean's going to take over and walk you through creating your very first ArcGIS Online web map and web app.
Awesome. Very good, Robert. As always, that's a great introduction to what we'll be covering. So what you saw there, Robert introduced a lot of the concepts that we'll be going over, but in a hands-on sort of way. But before we get really hands-on, I tend to like to give kind of like an overview of where some of the buttons and levers are at in ArcGIS Online, as well as just general information about the online infrastructure. And what I'm referring to is kind of some of the associated kind of peripheral apps that are associated with ArcGIS Online, to just understand how your data is positioned and accessible through all these other excellent applications that you can use in concert with ArcGIS Online. I'll also cover a little bit about the exercise and and how to interpret it. I sometimes say that we like to frame these workshops in a way that we convey all the things that we wish that we knew when we first started, but didn't. And that's kind of hard. So we kind of get carried away with filling out, making these exercises that have about 10 gallons of information in them with 5 gallons of time that we have to work with. And so there's a lot of extra quote unquote optional directions that are in the written instructions that should have come to you at about 11:15 today. If you didn't notice that email, check your emails. You should have the download links for both the presentation that Robert just gave, or the slides rather, as well as the exercise that we'll be working through. Before we do that, again, I'm going to go over some things that are that I think are important. Starting with, when we get done, we're going to give you an evaluation form. If you could please fill that out, that'd be great. We take those very seriously. We're always trying to improve these workshops as we go. And the comments and those reviews are very helpful. One of the things that has come up numerous times in those evaluations is please include some kind of instructions on how to manage the real estate on our screen while we're doing so many things at once, including having the exercise instructions. And I'm going to share my screen now so that this will make more sense. Oops, here we go. I'm going to switch over to the instructions. That's something we'll come back to at the end. So we have the instructions for the workshop. What I typically like to do is take the instructions and slide them over to the left side of my screen. So they're tucked over there. It is useful a lot of the time to go into the instructions, and instead of having to type out long file names, and what I've done in the instructions for my convenience is I've bolded and highlighted some of the directions in red. We'll get down to one. So as I zoom through it, like USA counties, I could just copy and paste that in for a search function. So I like to include this over on the left-hand side of my screen. I then tend to put the working space right in the middle. So I have my ArcGIS Online pane or window will be in the middle. That'll be separate from the pane or window of our exercise directions. I have this actually from Google Drive right now. You will have a PDF. One thing to note that's come up before, sometimes people will open up their PDF in something like Adobe, and for whatever reason, they're not able to copy and paste, say URLs, that kind of thing from it. If you right click and open with either Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome, then you can copy and paste URLs. So we have some URLs that are buried down here in the directions. You don't want to have to type them all the way out. So again, I'll have the directions to the left. I'll put our working ArcGIS Online window in the center. And then I tend to suggest putting the Zoom over to the far right. Of course, many of us here have got to be experts at Zoom over the course of COVID and thereafter. So you might have your own methods of going about this, but still, it's just like to give a little kind of some suggestions there. The exercise can be handled in a couple different ways. So some people like to just follow along and follow just the Zoom and what my directions are from the Zoom. I go through the exercise skipping some parts just because there'll be sections in here, like say info only, you'll see that you'll get to, or there'll be spots that say optional. There's let's see, exercise. So example, here it says optional. You can put that. I may skip over some of those depending on the time that we have that will be eating up pretty quick. I do want to kind of cruise through this pretty efficiently today because I'm going to do something a little different that I haven't done in any of the past ArcGIS Online introduction workshops, because they have a new just out of beta version of the map viewer that we'll be working in that I would like to introduce you to, that we'll be transitioning to at some point in the near future. It's very similar in concept to what we'll be using. You'll see that it's extremely similar, except for it's just a little more complicated in some ways, but it does more and it's really neat. And so that'll be kind of a neat treat that we'll kind of touch on, at least overview, if we have sufficient time toward the end of the workshop, or kind of the middle-ish to end of the workshop. It's fun. It's a really neat new update that ESRI, the parent company of ArcGIS Online, has come out with. I saw from the introductions that many of you are ones, twos, that kind of thing. That's great. We can frame our workshop to be at your pace, so hopefully you don't have any problems with that. And if you do have any issues, they tend to revolve around two things. Well, really one thing, and specifically, is your application that you've downloaded. There's sometimes we have folks from say UC Berkeley, and their license for their ArcGIS Online doesn't have all the functionality that we want. I think we've weeded out most of those little sharp points in the exercises in the past to avoid having issues that like one license will work with and one won't. But that can be a little bit of an issue. And sometimes there's a little bit of a hardware issue or access to the data. So through like server, through firewalls or whatever. But hopefully we don't have any of those issues. Hopefully all of you have got your ArcGIS Online set up. We tend to have a nice 10-minute break at roughly around 2 p.m. And in that time period, if anyone is having issues, we'll have Robert and Ben Satzman and Maggie Kelly and Genoa will all be here to help you out if you need help. When we go through the exercise, go ahead and put your questions in the comments. Because I also have very little real estate, I tend to hide my Zoom window way off to the side so I can see everything. And I rely on my compatriots to kind of relay questions to me if they come up. Sometimes I'll save those questions until the breaks, which will take a longer one to start with, and then more frequent, shorter ones later on. But I'll answer those questions either while I'm in the flow of it or when we get to the break, depending on the question and what we're working on. Anyways, with that said, let's jump into some little bit of orientation with ArcGIS Online. This will be mostly hands-off, but I want you to do one thing right off the bat, and I am going to shut down a couple things so my screen share doesn't have like my emails popping up, for example, or beeps or downloads that are in the way. I want you to open up ArcGIS Online. And what we'll do here is I'm going to start a new tab, but you can you just bring up your browser, whichever browser you prefer, and you'll just go to ArcGIS Online login. So you'll have to type it in. It just happens to be the last thing I put in preparation for today. So we'll go here. Everybody take this step. We're going to make sure everyone can get in. Click sign in. and then use the credentials that you either previously have used or what you might have just received from Robert this week. Oop. Dang it. So once ArcGIS Online comes up, I mentioned that we'll separate this out so we can have, in my case, I will have this on a different window. So I'm going to pop it off of the tabs of the other window so I can have it in the center. Typically, and I'll expand this out a ways. This brought me back to my content. Oftentimes, depending on your license setup, you'll come into ArcGIS Online and it'll bring you to a home page, or often it brings you to your organization page. Your home page is just something that your organization sets up. In this case, it's IGIS that set this up, or specifically Robert and Shane Fire that have prepared our home screen. You don't really work in that, but it's a good splash page with some neat cards in it. I'm going to go across the top, mostly left to right across the top, but I'm going to jump over map and then come back to that at the end, because that's where you end up working the most and a lot of what will be working within during the hands-on exercise. And so that'll be a good stop point. But to give just an orientation, you got this, I would call it a conditional ribbon, but it's really just a ribbon across the top that will give you different options that pop up. In case of your gallery, this is where your organization's data is stored. And that includes all kinds of maps, layers, scenes, and we'll come back to what a scene is and what layers are. If I'm throwing out these terms, hopefully I do a good job of kind of explaining what you're looking at, what we're talking about. But if I don't hesitate to ask in the questions. So I know not everyone's born with all the terminology of mapping or online mapping. But so we'll have layers, which are the points, lines, polygons, rasters that we're putting into our maps. We have scenes, which are three-dimensional kind of draped layers. We have apps. So those are kind of like more full-fledged kind of website-esque assets or apps that we've created that you can use. Again, very similar to what looks like a normal web page sometimes. And then all these other things, tools and notebooks and so forth, that are included within the organization. You can search for things that your organization has. And in our case, if you're a member of UCANR, and I know that near like about a third or so of folks here are UCANR in the workshop that are attending. So if you have access to tons of stuff in here, including data about our research and extension centers. And if you're UCANR, you know what that's about. But moving on, we'll skip over map. We'll go to scene just for the fun of it. We won't be getting into this today, really, but it is something neat. Once you've brought in layers of various sorts, you can create these three-dimensional scenes. And I'm looking for one that's just, I'm going to just pick one randomly. These are just options that you can see or that are defaults, and it'll give it a second because these 3D scenes tend to be kind of complex. Hopefully this one works and it doesn't appear to be doing anything. But while it's thinking or not doing what I was hoping it would do, usually those scenes just pop right up. I'd like to note that across the top, the horizontal ribbon has disappeared and it's turned into a vertical ribbon. So I'm going to back up, though, to get out of the scene because it's sort of anticlimactic to bring up a scene that's empty. So I'll go to home, jump out, and then I'm going to go back into scene to pick one that's actually functional. Oh, and it brought me back to the same. Oh, there we go. I'll try another one of these. There we go. Here's one that works. So in this point is I liked bringing up scene for one reason other than it's kind of pretty and neat to look at the scenes and see how you can visualize your data. But for a practical point, if any of you right now don't have a mouse or a trackball and you're trying to use the touchpad on your computer, that's going to be really challenging for you. You pretty much, I almost say I mean, maybe you're masterful with the touchpad and you could try to get by with that, but really a trackball or a mouse are important. And the reason for that is that then it allows you to scroll around. You can rotate and see things from different angles, but this applies sometimes in your more your two-dimensional apps. This is more like 3 or 2.5 dimensional, 2.5 because you can't look up and under things, but still it's yeah, you can see how neat this is. And if you publish something like this from the public create app, then you can use that app in the URL to put into a web page or just send on as it is to your cousin or whatever, or your work, whatever you need to use it for. All right. I'm going to back up. I'm not going to burn too much time on some of these things. You could play with this stuff for quite a while. And by the way, again, I'll repeat, this is mostly just show and tell, just talking about it where you don't have to be, you can just be watching what I'm doing if you'd like right now. There's nothing important other than, I mean, nothing important that you need to be doing right now other than just hopefully having your ArcGIS Online come up and work correctly. Moving on so that we'll skip the map. We're going to go to Notebook next. Robert mentioned that there is a growing ability within ArcGIS Online to do analysis, and that is through your notebook. So you have different notebook levels that you can set. They use credits to in some cases, not the standard, but the more advanced ones. Traditionally or in the past, there's you've normally done your analysis on your desktop, but increasingly, for those specifically that have a little bit of programming chops, you can, if you know Python programming, you can do data engineering, analysis, geoprocessing, that sort of thing within notebooks in ArcGIS Online. And you can see where it comes up a little bit slower. And within this environment, you can set up whatever buffers or whatever you need to do. I'm not really a programmer. I say not really because I cheat once in a while. I will run something in ArcGIS Pro and then go to the history of the code and copy and paste. And so I call myself a copy and paste programmer. That's not even really a programmer really, but it gets the job done sometimes. So anyhow, yeah, and this also sometimes requires some kinds of dependencies and packages, Python packages specifically that come in. It works on top of Jupyter Notebooks, which is really neat if you're familiar with that. And so a lot of it has similar functionality with some little nuances that you have to work out with cloning your environment sometimes. But anyways, I digress. I'm going to now go back. This one opened up a new tab. I'm going to skip out of that. And so I'm going to go back to the horizontal tab across the top. We did see Notebook. We'll go to Groups. When it comes to sharing your data, groups are important. When you're working on a web map, sometimes you will just want to work on it locally and for only your use. And then once you get your web map set up, when it's ready to kind of go live, you can be done at kind of like nested stages. You can have it shared to just a group of people within your organization. You can share it to your organization, or you can share it to everybody in the world that has internet access. So you can set your levels. And the first level besides just yourself would be a group. In this case, I've created all these groups: broadband, CalNaturalist, groundhog, squirrels, a whole bunch of groups that I've used. And then when I'm working on a map, I can just share it to that group and it's accessible to them for reference, or sometimes for mobile data collection apps that they can bring in the web mapping data or visualizations. So groups are important. And the thing is you can only do groups within your organization. You can't cross organizational accounts. There might be a way if you contact Esri, but in general, it's just anybody within ANR can use this, and we can't really share it to people with licenses from, say, UC Berkeley, without including like giving them a license to our UCANR license group. So just a couple little nuances that you have just to be aware of. Going on, content. This is like your library of data. Everything that you have, including feature layers, hosted feature layers, those are referring to the level of service that they provide, the hosted part that is. Hosted means you control it. You can set what can be done with the data during this in some of the settings portions of the data layers. And sometimes you'll see these in here and they're not hosted. That creates limitations. Sometimes you'll bring in data from online that are not hosted, and you can't do everything you want to do with them, specifically certain types of analysis. There's the ways that get around that, but just know that hosted is kind of the default that we prefer in most cases. There's you can see even everything from a CSV, or sometimes you can have text files. Insta app, that's a new thing that pops up here now as one of the recent updates in the new web map builder. Web maps, web mapping applications, Robert kind of touched on that, but I'm going to reiterate. Web maps are like the basic map that you start working with. Imagine a map with points, lines, polygons. You can do your symbology in there. Another term for that is stylize the different layers that you put in there. And when you're ready, you can publish that and add widgets, legends, scale bars, things like that. When you do that, that becomes a web mapping application. So it's the base map, or the web map is the base for the web mapping application, that you add all those other types of infographics to your web map. And then there's all kinds of other things in here that you'll see sometimes, including story maps and that kind of thing. On the left side, I have a whole bunch of folders. Right now I'm working out of the ArcGIS training folder, but I have, just to keep things organized, there's all these different different projects that I've worked on. I just happen to have this up from the last practice in the last couple of days to make sure everything is working fine. It's nice to keep things organized, drop them in there. You can look at all of your content sometimes like this. There's something else. I'm going to stretch this over a little bit so I can see a little bit more. When you create layers, maps, ArcGIS Online usually prompts you to give a tag, and those tags are extremely useful. For example, I can search for junk because I tag tons of my data with junk, and every once in a while, I need to go clean this out. In fact, I'm probably due to clean it out again, because if I teach this workshop 5 times, I don't need to have 5 variations. Well, actually, it's more like 10 or 12 or 15 variations of the same thing because of a bunch of practice iterations or updates that I'm making. So I tag stuff that I know is not going to be, it's not going to be permanent. I'm going to tag it with junk. So I can go through all of these and then delete them if I feel so inclined, like I will right now, and delete. But you have that search ability that you can use at the top. You can also star certain things. So say the ANR location CSV is really important. I can star that as a favorite, and then I can go to my favorite layers, because sometimes you need to go back and find certain things that are really that are important to you. Maybe you have a layer of counties, USA counties, that you want to go back to all the time. It's nice to have that favorite in it and then be able to easily access it. Oftentimes ArcGIS Online, all kinds of Esri products like to have a lot of redundancy, one of which is there's an organization option for your content. that is very similar to the gallery. I don't know why it's like virtually the same thing, but you have that organization. You also have Living Atlas for types of content that you can get to. In the past, it was, I'm thinking, I don't know how many years ago it kind of evolved out of it, but not that super long ago, data was the hardest thing for you to get to, as it was much, much, much harder to get data. Say, I don't know, when did I really start using GIS? Around 20 years ago now. Geez, time flies. Roughly 20 years ago when I started doing GIS, it was incredibly difficult to find content back then. Now you've got hundreds of thousands of layers at your disposal right off the bat, at least if you're logged into something like an ArcGIS online account. And even otherwise, you can find things that are, so much data is available you can bring in. But back to across the top, where I right on time on my glide path here is nice, just to give us a break at 2. Next tab over is your organization. In organization, you see the credits that are available to your organization. You have a variety of other options down through here. One note is that each organization is allotted a certain number of credits, and that's like on a yearly basis. We have quite a lot, but we also have 771 members, which excitingly, it's growing every time we do a workshop, it seems like. So it's continuously growing with the number of members that we have that are using ArcGIS Online through UCANR. It's great. But it might seem like we have a lot of credits, but on certain occasions, we've had, well, on one specific occasion, we had someone try to geocode like every address in Los Angeles, and it used up almost all of our credits. So now we have a limitation on credits. This also applies to certain types of analysis and visualization of that you're capable of doing, including with your notebooks. If you did end up coming up to to your limitation, you can always reach out to IGIS, specifically if you're like UCANR affiliated associate. We can work with that. That's not a problem. We just want to make sure that there's no accidental like use of all of our credits in the future. And lastly, I'm going to go to map, because that's where we're going to be working. By default, this is what should come up. This is still the default, at least for our organization. There is a new option, is map viewer. This is called classic map viewer now. Map viewer was in beta and just till very, very recently. I mentioned earlier, maybe before the call, that if given time, I'll look at this and show you how similar that is, but where buttons and levers are all in different places. But it's a very exciting new function, but it's a little bit more complicated, and I think a slightly steeper learning curve. But it's the same. It's something similar to this. It's just different way of going about creating your maps. And once again, Esri does that. They create a whole bunch of different ways to do similar things. So sometimes it's just picking which flavor is your favorite. Once we get into this environment, so everybody go ahead and do that now from across the top. This is on the vertical now, but select My Map and then come in here. And while we're on the break, you'll have the opportunity to go through some of these options on the left. It's kind of like a mini tutorial just to kind of get your hands dirty a little bit. Just note that across the top, there's some various options like base map. There's like roughly 25 or so base maps that you can pick from. Which ones are the best really depends on what the objective of your map is or what the needs of your target audience are. So we'll work with a different base map when we're doing the exercise. There's analysis. One thing that you can't do right now is analysis because there's nothing to analyze. You need to have layers. So I clicked on analysis. I'm going to go back to details. because it shows the contents in here. We don't have any contents. Once we get rolling, then we will. I'm going to click on the explanation mark. That'll give you some option to start going. One last thing that I will do, actually, I guess I didn't mean to do that. It's going to stretch this over. One last thing I'm going to do just to show you. Stay here right now. Don't worry. Just stay in this page without all the highlight. Stay right where this is at. I'm going to just do something. I'm going to go out to just my home. It doesn't matter which one I pick, just to show you something else that you're capable of doing. This, again, show and tell. When you're outside of your map, you'll have this little cluster of dots. Under that cluster of dots, you will see all of these different options that are associated apps with ArcGIS Online, like Experience Builder, which is one of the ways that you can create web mapping applications. There's a whole huge collection of different templates that you can use there. You can open up another classic map viewer. They haven't changed the name in ArcGIS Online yet, but they've changed it right here. So that's what we were just looking at with your map viewer. There's survey 1, 2, 3, all these different options, and that comes in under the cluster up here. We'll come back to that later in the exercise because there is a value to using that and when you're working on your web mapping applications. Come back that to the very end. Sometimes you want to have multiple screens open. And with that said, guys, let's come back at 2:10. Let's go back at 2:10 and we'll continue on. Give me a little 7-8 minute break. Good. So yeah, we'll get going here again. And with that, I will get back to the map right where you were at before. So hopefully you're still in your map screen. So this is where we're going to get moving and actually going through steps. The one thing I'll note, because I know that a lot of you, like, you're just brand new to this, I will slow down and I'll repeat however many times we need to go over something. It's okay. It's not like knowing where those buttons and levers at come to you intuitively in most cases. And so especially when you're trying to toggle between one screen to the next, if you have trouble or you miss something, go ahead and throw it in the chat. One of the team members can catch me at a moment and say, hey, go ahead and can you repeat that? And we'll adjust the presentation accordingly. Again, you might follow along just with what I am displaying on my screen. You might want to go through the exercise directions and do it on your own pace and kind of over and listen to what I'm doing and try to pace yourself that way. Everyone has their own strategy. I think typically most people follow the Zoom or just and then try to repeat it or do the same steps I'm doing. But again, that's challenging unless you have, say, split monitors where you can put me on one screen and your exercise stuff on the other screen. It gets, yeah, again, there's not a lot of room on the screens for everything sometimes. So now moving on, we are in here. If you have already started doing some of the kind of the tutorial under the details, the little information tab about this map options, you might need to go back and do a new map. And so create new map is what you may need to do to clear out whatever you've been doing. If you had something that you wanted to save, you would have needed to save it, or else you would lose it when you do that. I don't think we've done anything that's save worthy quite yet. So once you get into this map, we're going to start adding data. And that's really one of the big things when you get to creating your maps, is just collecting what you want and putting it down on your map. And that takes time to figure out what you do need depending on the theme that you're working towards. In this case, we're going to have a forest fire based theme, and there's a reason for that. I'll come back to that a little bit after we've got some data in the map and explain how this kind of workshop came to be the way it is. But let's start off with something simple, just for reference. We'll go up to the top and under Add, click the drop down next to Add, and we're going to search for layers. So we'll click Add, search for layers at the top left-hand corner of your screen. So this is where you can start following along. And you'll see a variety of things up in here, that including some of the last things that I've loaded on here. But what I'm going to do is search not in my content, but I want to search on ArcGIS Online. So you have all these different options: your favorites, your groups, your organization, Living Atlas. Again, there's different ways we can get at that. And then ArcGIS Online is what we'll be using first. And what we'll want first is USA counties, USA counties. And click enter. And once you have this, you'll see the second one down, the USA Census one's a little more like detailed than we need. We just need a reference layer. So we'll use the generalized boundaries. It's the second option down. There's a couple ways that we can load this in. One is we can click on this and it'll come up and give us what's called metadata, is information or data about the data. This is important sometimes because you need to sometimes give credits or attribution where it's due. Sometimes you just need to vet it or know that it comes from a reliable source. And that's up to you to determine, but we can find out more about the data that we're bringing in under this tab. If you're satisfied with it, and I have to move my zoom window out of the way or raise this up, there we go, so I can see it from my zoom tabs, then I can add it to the map. And you'll see it populates over the entire United States. And once you're satisfied, you can go up and X out of that at the top. So you should see this. We can zoom out a little bit. You'll see that the Alaska's up there, but what we're going to be interested in today is California. You can do a variety of different things with this data. You can filter it and only have California. There's a couple different ways that you can work with this, and we'll come back to that as a further orientation in a moment. But right now we have this in, and it looks good. We are still in the add data section here. So I'm going to click back and we'll go to content. So you'll see we're still in about, but we don't need that. We want to be in content right now. And this is where you will see this vector file that came in. One of the ways you know it's a vector file, which is denoted by that it's a point line or a polygon, is this is a whole bunch of polygons put together. If it was a raster, think like an image or a aerial photograph or something like that, it would be a raster, not a vector. Here, now that we have some kind of content in there, we have some options that we can look at. You can show a legend of what it is. There's not much to it. You can see the attribute table that is down below, that will pop up down below by default. At least in my case, it does. And along that attribute table, you'll see all kinds of different information, state name, abbreviations, FIP codes, you name it, populations, various information. If you wanted to, we can hide the table again, but if you wanted to, you can filter it. I'm going to skip one, filter, and you could filter by the name, or the county or the FIPS code. So you only have, say, California show up. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to do a filter later with another data set. You can change the symbology. Let's do that right now. I know in the directions is a little bit later where we jump into symbology toward the end, but while it's right here and fresh, we might as well change the symbology just a little bit. So I'm going to cancel out of that so you can see what I did. I just went to this little stack of like circle, triangle, squares, and clicked on the change style. And then we have variety. Sometimes, depending on the type of data set, you'll have a variety of options so you can pick. In this case, it's just a single symbol. There's only one data set type there. So we're going to click on options. And then go up to symbols and click the little box. You can see what I'm saying. The next is symbols. There's the little brown box. Click that because brown is not the most appealing thing in the whole world. I mean, at least when it's contrasting with the other layers that we'll be putting in there. And sometimes you do this at the end because you'll have to play with your symbology to make the right things contrast correctly. But right now we just want it to be shaded. So we'll make it kind of a medium dark fill, but I want the transparency way up there, not quite 100%. So see what I did is I clicked on kind of a darkish gray color, maybe even darker than that. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a shadow is over whatever we put down. So then other symbols will pop off of the background imagery a little bit better once we lay it down. So we have fill, and then we'll do the outline. And this, we don't need to have any transparency. We can just make it black. It's fine. And no transparency because it's just the outline color. And then we'll click OK. And you can see now you have the outlined background of all the counties in the United States. Sometimes when it comes in, a new layer will come in. You'll have an automatic transparency here, but you also have the visible range. One of the layers will come in with will have a visible range that is not at the scale that we want. See this little slider down here on the left bottom, the little pointer with the triangle. The triangle that you see there, if you can see that, is what zoom scale you're at right now. The slider is what zoom scale you're at to be able to see it on your map. If it goes below that, it'll disappear. If it goes above that and it's within this gray range, then it will reappear. There's a different kind of online cartographic techniques you can use. So you can zoom into a layer and then say one background will disappear and another background will appear. And that's kind of a nice dynamic way of visualizing your data sometimes. But once we have that in there, we can just click OK and click Done. If you don't click Done, then it won't save your results. So there we got some county layers that are in. But let's add some more data now. And I'm going again by the directions. I'm zooming through these, and some things I'll talk about, some things I might skip over a little bit, but I will scroll down so I have a general idea where we're at in the directions so I can explain that. So we just went through page 13, the very beginning. Next, so we're going to put in some Caldor fire data. I'll go back to my map and I will add data. Again, this time I'm going to go for search layers. So everybody in your web map, again, go up to click add the drop down and then search layers. It should default to your ArcGIS Online, but if it doesn't, you might have to select ArcGIS Online from your selections. We can X out of the USA counties. Second, I got a dry throat. I'll take a sip of water. And then we will search for Caldor fire. So that's CADOR fire. And just click it. And then you'll get some different options that come up. Normally, I think I know the directions say to put the DIN layer down first, and then we'll do the burn severity layer second. But for the sake of efficiency, let's just put down the Caldor burn severity layer first. This comes from NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the USGS. And this layer here, if we click on it, we'll see that it is the burn severity that was calculated from the fire after the fire was done. So we'll click add to map. If I can get my zoom out of the way, good. And it came in. This time it automatically forced my map to zoom in, but watch what happens. Now, this is one of the reasons I brought this up first, because we just talked about it. I'm going to X out of this here, and I'm going to zoom out. And look what happened. It disappeared. It still disappears. It's not there. And the reason for that is because the visibility range isn't set right. This throws a lot of people off when this happens. And this is a pretty common thing when you're bringing in online data. So what we'll do is from here, we will click on the DINs first, just for efficiency. We'll add that in there. This time we don't have to look at it. It's well, actually, let's look at the metadata a little bit. It's the Caldor Damage Inspection Database. So they sent out inspectors to residences or structures throughout a burn area, and those inspections then get put into GIS that are available to the public. One of my good friends actually did it for this fire. And that data, once you add it in, which I could click on the plus sign here other than add to map at the bottom, will show the structures and the level of burn severity, whether they were not damaged at all to where they're fully destroyed. Fortunately, there was this is in the Grizzly Flats area. There was I recall there was about 460 houses burned down, including my dad's best friend. It's a real bummer. But anyhow, we still need to be able to see this Caldor fire burn severity layer that still isn't showing up unless you zoom in like this, and it might show up. There we go. Kind of comes in. And the way to do that is we're going to go back with the back button at the top left-hand corner. So hopefully you added in the Caldor burn severity and the DINs now. And if you haven't yet, just take a second to do that. X out of the pane that ends up being over here, and we'll go back. And inside here, you'll see the DINs, the damage assessment layer, and that's a point layer, and that's on top of this raster layer. To adjust the visibility range, we'll click these three little dots next to it in the drop down. And the third option down is the set the visibility range. And you can see that by default, it comes in where you have to be zoomed in quite a ways to be able to see it. Why it's set like that, I don't know, but it is the way it is. So what we just need to do is stretch that out, and then it will appear on our map. So we'll get some, then we can see where it burned the worst. The DINS data that's here, that is in a fine visibility range. There's no issues with that. While we're here, let's look at a couple of the other options that are available to you. You can have your zoom to, which is really handy. That zooms you to the layer, but in this case, it zooms you a little too close. Sometimes it's a hassle in ArcGIS Online because it jumps you zoom levels more than you would like. You wish sometimes that you could zoom just a little bit and not a lot, but it just is what it is. It's there's some ways that you can adjust that, by the way, though. I'll show you as a new function in the map viewer, including the map viewing applications. But yeah, so we're at the correct zoom here. The one way that you could shade this, I mentioned before, we can use the counties to shadow things. You can look at these red houses here. They show up, but they're kind of hard to see over the background of the red burned area. What you can do is slide up the counties over, and it will shade it a little bit, but it didn't shade it as much as I would like. So I'm going to adjust the transparency on that a little bit. And the way I do that is I go back down. And this, by the way, and this kind of is in the weeds a little bit with the cartography, but still, that's honestly one of the funnest things about doing these sometimes, just playing with the cartography of it and the visualization. But if you really want to get it really nice looking, we'll go into change the style of the USA counties generalized boundaries. We'll go into the options again, go into the symbol again. We've done this once, and I'm going to dial back my transparency a ways. Click OK, and click OK, and done. And then it does kind of mute the background. And you could do that over and over until it's just the way you like it, but it does mute the background. And one way I can tell that it mutes the background is if I turn this on and off, it gives it just a little bit more of a pop with the layer that's above it. But anyways, let's move on. So I'm back into the directions. The next thing we're going to do is we've done the burn severity. We looked at some of the legend options that we have here. Just note that there's the zoom to, the transparency level, the set visibility range. There's that you can adjust there. You can remove, make copies, save layers. All of those different options are down in the under those contents tabs options. There's some info only in here. Next, let's look at a couple things that are kind of interesting, including the wild risk to communities. This is neat. So I'm going to copy this here, this one layer. Mine's redded, but yours it will be on page 16, number 2. I'm going to Control C, copy wildlife risk to communities. And this data, by the way, comes from Living Atlas. So we're getting data from a different source. In fact, this exercise has been created so you get data from both ArcGIS well, not just both, from ArcGIS Online, from Living Atlas, from tabular data, and from a shapefile. So you get kind of a little mini smorgasbord of different types of data that you can bring into your project and visualize. So now I'm going to search for that in Living Atlas. So again, that's, what was that, page 16, number 2. I just copied, or you can just type it in, wildlife risk to communities. Going in here, I'm going to click the add. This time, I'm going to browse Living Atlas. There's the second option down. It's not showing anything for Caldor Fire because that's a ArcGIS Online data set, but Living Atlas has other things. If I Control V, click enter, so wildlife risk to communities. This comes from the U.S. Forest Service. It's been updated as of this year, which is pretty neat. And they keep it up to date fairly well. I could click on it to see more information. There's a lot of it. And I'll close that. And then just click the plus sign here to add it to the map. Usually it comes in over the top. Well, this case, it's a base layer. Just the way this type of service is. Oh, so it's an image service is a base layer. So it came in underneath all my data. I brought this in for a reason because I found this kind of neat to show how, show that the models are working really well. I know most of us here are scientists of one sort or another, many of which probably kind of GIS remote sensing or other natural resources or agriculture specialists. We can appreciate models. And in this case, what's neat is if I go back and click off of the Caldor burn severity map and turn it back on, you'll see that even though they're at a significantly different scale, the model layer in the background, the wildfire risk layer is coarser, came from different data sources. It's still pretty good. It matches up pretty well with what actually happened in terms of burn severity. So and I know there's a lot of other factors that go into it, including like real-time firefighter efforts, as well as wind, moisture, all kinds of different climate or weather related factors that will change us. But the fire burned the most intensely where the model said it probably would. So that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to turn off that bottom layer now because we don't need that necessarily. Good. Let's add one more layer that's kind of neat though, and we'll go back to the directions, is the current USA fires or USA current fires. This is also in Living Atlas, so I'll Control C. And I'm going to go add from Living Atlas, clear, and I'll paste that in there. USA current fires, enter in. And then we'll just collect the first one from Esri. Esri does a pretty good job of coming up with a number of different close to real-time data sets. I wouldn't say real-time. There's a reason why I created the Caldor fire mapping project that I did when the time came. I'll come to that in a second. But there's you see all the fires that are going on right now in California. This might be interesting to you for any number of reasons, for reference or otherwise. One thing to consider is that this layer is going to change over time, as well as the next layer that we're going to put in. So if I zoom in here, you can see the footprints of these given fires. And that data you might want to hold on to. It's dynamic. It changes from date to date. This time of year, there's fires. When I do this workshop in January, there's not many fires. If you want to kind of freeze this data, what you can do is use your analysis tools, feature analysis, and summarize, I believe is the right one. You could join this with something like we won't do that right now, by the way. I'm just showing you a way that you could do. You could use the U.S. current fires, and then you might join that with your counties layer. In that way, it'll freeze the data and the points and the polygons of those current wildfires kind of freeze it in time, so you can keep your map static then instead of dynamic, is when they stop displaying the same data, like next month or whatever. But I digress. I'm going to go back. So I'm just clicking these back buttons here. So if everyone's following along, just go ahead and get click back until you're back to your contents again. Give you a second there while I have a sip. All right, next, let's add in one more layer just for fun. And this is just practice for adding layers, but also to show you some of the data that's available to you. I mentioned earlier before the call that we'd be putting in a little bit of air quality data, because this is interesting to, well, me specifically, because I have terrible allergies and smoke really annoys me sometimes of the year, just as it probably does everyone else. I'm going to search for layers this time, and I think it's just something simple like air quality. Yes, it is. I'm going to search for air quality. And not in my content. I think this is in Living Atlas as well. It might be in both. Some layers are actually in both Living Atlas and in ArcGIS Online. Yep, this is in Living Atlas. So we have the air quality now monitoring stations. I'm going to just add that in. We don't need to look at the metadata for now, but what you'll see is all the values, the index values for the particle counts. See up around the fire, it's up to like 160. That's anything over, I don't know, over 200, it really gets to be uncomfortable. There were places in Placerville during the Caldor fire that were 1,300. That was like, that's not safe. But but yeah, so you can get this data. There's also wind data that you can put in here, and any other number of layers of data that you can include. But of course, now this is getting way too cluttery for my taste. We don't need it like this. This is just kind of crazy. So let's go back and we'll turn off some of these layers. The air quality now can get turned off. The current fires can get turned off. Let's zoom in. Oops, use current fires. The perimeters can get turned off. And let's zoom back into our Caldor fire layer. There, that's more or less where I want it. Oh, dang it. My zoom is just glitching a little bit. Sometimes it's like that. Oops, there we go. Anyways, so let's add some more layers of data in there. Tabular data. So imagine this. You're creating a map for some reason, and I came up with kind of just a hypothetical situation. They say, what if we wanted to relate the fires locations and the burned down structures with possible resources that might be valuable? And Robert mentioned that we have advisors throughout all of California and every single county that at least represent every single county that handle things from natural resources to agricultural advisements, but they also have a number of other statewide organization and partnered organizations that work with us, like the CalFresh and the FNEPs that provide like food resources and other things to people that need them. And in the case of this fire, there was a lot of people that were put into pretty dire straits because of it. And we might want to know who they are to see if we can provide like outreach support to them, or maybe provide them with a map on how to get to our resources that we could share. And so in this case, let's bring in some data of where our local county offices are at. And the way we do that is we this time we actually have to go to the directions, and we'll copy this tabular data URL here. Or in my case, I could just go click it, but I'm going to do it the way you do it. I'm going to bring it up and paste it in. This is in Google Drive. And you'll see this tabular data. This is a CSV file here because ArcGIS Online can ingest CSV and tabular text data. And we'll click download. And I already downloaded it to, well, apparently I have one from way back because I have this one the third time now in there, but that's fine. Now that it's in my downloads, I'll just go to the folder and I'll just open that up in Excel for now, just to show you what it is. You don't have to open it up, but just download it for now. Oops. Close. It's fine. And so what you'll see here is a field ID number, the location. So it says what office it is, the UC Cooperative Extension Office, and then the address. One of the neat things about ArcGIS Online is that it can do what's called geocode, which it can position dots or vector file or create a vector file of a list of addresses like this, just like you might see in, say, Google Earth or Google Maps. So you get, so it has the same type of functionality, but you just have to bring this list in and it'll automatically do that for you. So I'm going to close that for now, and I don't need to save it because it's already good. I'm going to reduce this down, and let's add that into our map. What we'll do is we'll click on Add, search for layers, and instead we will, my content. It is not in my content yet. So I might have to save this and then come back to it. You do a time check. I think it's good time for a break anyways. And so what we'll do is that we will come back and we'll add this in, and then we will get into a little bit more visualization and stylization, and then I'll tell you a little story about how this came up, and we can get onto some of our more computed cartography steps. Sound good? If there's any questions, go ahead and throw them in there. We'll take a, say, 5-minute break. Call it to let me see if I get the clock right on, because my Zoom is in front of my clock on my computer, until 2:48, and then we'll continue from there. Save your map though first. Click save right here, and what will happen, excuse me, so actually we'll, hopefully no one jumped off, but we'll it's okay if they did. It's not catastrophic, but they're we need to give it a title. I'm just going to say map practice, but you can call it whatever you want. Caldor Fire. The main thing you have to do is give it a tag. I'm going to say junk because this will be, I don't know how many times I've done it, but you might want to put in like fire data, Caldor, whatever you might want to have it, training. So you have to add a tag in though. It won't let you save it otherwise. And then I'm going to put it in my training folder. You guys don't have folders, so you don't have to worry about that. And we'll click Save Map, and that way we'll be good when we come back. All right, let's get going again. And so the next thing is the county offices that I want to add in. So hopefully everyone is back. And what we'll do next is go to, and if someone isn't here, it's all right. I actually kind of planned this break specifically for the timing. So what we're going to do is add a layer from a file. And in this case, we're going to bring in a CSV file. We can bring in shape files, but by the way, the shape files, for those of you that aren't GIS type folk, a shape file is actually a collection of files that have to be combined together into a zip file. We'll look at that in a minute. We can also add in text or CSV files. I mentioned that before. GPX is the kind of actually originated from Garmin, but now it's used in cell phones. So if you added cell phone GPS data or other open source standard formatted stuff like JSON, you can put that in. But right now we're going to put in a CSV file. So we're going to click import layer. Oops. First, we had to choose the file. So choose file. So for those of you just coming in, I clicked add data, add layer from file. And now we're going to choose a file. And it by default brought me back to my downloads. But if it didn't, you might have to navigate to your downloads and click the ANR locations file that you just downloaded. And that again came from your exercise somewhere up tabular data on page 17, right in the middle under exercise tabular data. You have to go to that link to download that if anybody missed that part. By the way, throw in the comments too if I'm moving too quick. I can slow down if need be. So when I get all excited and I just charge through this stuff, I don't want to leave anybody behind. But it seems like we're doing pretty good. So we got that tabular data, we loaded it in. The next thing is we're going to end up adding some this is for the analysis results that we'll get to. So we added in the ANR locations. Open. Oops, that's my file explorer. Choose ANR locations, open. Import layer. Good. So we added open, and now we get here, and I have to stretch this out. So what it's doing is it's trying to match up so I showed you that tabular data, and it had the addresses and the IDs. The key thing is that ArcGIS Online is trying to match what it thinks it is with what it really is. And so in this case, where it's trying to match up the address to the address or place is what ArcGIS Online believes it is. It does a great job of figuring that out. Very, very rarely it won't understand what's matched up because the column header or something like that is different. But for the most part, it matches it up. It can also use latitude and longitude. So it has this coordinates option that's up there, but in this case, it automatically recognizes addresses because most people don't know what the latitude, longitude of their houses are. But we can just add this in. And then you see we have all of these different cooperative extension offices all over the state. And it zoomed us out to the extent of it. We can see that there's a whole bunch of these little grayed other sites, and we're going to zoom in, and that is not very useful, knowing that that cooperative extension office right here in Placerville is just a little teeny gray spot. So let's do something about that symbology right now while we're here, instead of having to come back to this. And the way we do that is we're going to go over and choose the attribute to show, and we're going to say location, I think is fine. Here, let me double check. Well, actually, let's do this first. We gotta find out what the table looks like. So we'll just click done for now, and we'll come back to it in a second. So we have the attribute locations. Let's bring up the table. And it shows a variety of just the locations that are included here. We can zoom in a little bit more so we're closer. then we'll see that it doesn't really matter what the FID, there's no other attributes about this column that matter. And the reason why I'm looking for that is because you symbolize things based upon what they are. We don't have like a lot of description other than just the address of what it is and the FID number. So what we'll do is we'll go back into the symbols. We'll do click location single symbol, because we don't really care if it's where the or what kind of office it is right now. And we'll click on options. Oops. Location, single symbol, options. Click on the symbol. Let's make it something much more intuitive than just a little gray dot. And how we do that is we will go to, instead of shapes, we'll click on something like, I think it was under government is probably what I remember seeing. And if we scroll down, maybe it wasn't government. Let's try another one. It was infrastructure, maybe. General infrastructure. There we go. This is a little more like it. We can find a building looking something. There we go. Click on one of those, and the symbol size of 8 is way too small. Let's bring it up to something like 30. It's in the range of 30, and click OK. And there we have the local cooperative extension office that, which by the way, you can add if you had the, when you brought in the tabular data, you could have information in that Excel sheet that, such as the name of the office, the phone number, so people could contact it. So because when people go to this web map, they can click on it and get access to that information. It just shows the address and what is FID number. You can change that information so it's more detailed and adjust it so it looks cleaner. But for now, we just want to bring it in. And then once we have that symbol, this is important, we have to click OK and click done, or else it won't work. So hopefully everyone caught that. So we went in, we just changed the symbology of that layer. So now we have the local office. Next step, let's add in one more layer. This is slightly out of order, but I like to get the layers in there first. They're because we're going to come back up. We're going to be on page 20. I'm going to skip down and take this in, and then we'll do this step right above it, just because it'll come together a little bit cleaner. I might change these directions around a little bit, but just through the because when I'm speaking, I'm kind of like I'm expediting the process a little bit by the way I'm going in this order. When you actually read through it and put the data in it, like it builds on itself in a like just a little bit different way. It's a reason why I was in this order, but I like to skip things for now. Anyways, I'm going to grab this layer right down here, page 20, under the exercise perimeter data, and Control C. And then I am going to bring that up here, Control V, and click Enter. And what you'll see here, this is a FTP access to the CAL FIRE's database of fire information. Right now, what we're in is the dates of the fire. So you see on the left-hand side, those are dates, summary date, in information of each day of the fire, specifically perimeter fire, the fire's perimeter each day. So don't do this right now, but I just want to show you how neat this is, because when I discovered this was really slick. I went in and I found, I forget how I came across it, but if I go in back up enough levels, you don't need to do this because it might be hard to find your way back, or you'll have to re-enter the repaste it in above. If you go far enough out, this is the 2021 fire incidences. So we just looked at those current fires. If I click on that, here's all the major current fires that are going on right now that you can see. So if we wanted to get information on any one of these, and I don't know which one, shoot, Happy Camp. Oh no, There's one at Happy Camp. I know someone that we used to work with that has a place there. So inside of that, there's GIS data that can go into the map. That's what we're doing with the Caldor fire. So I'm going to back up to where the Caldor fire was at again. Hopefully you guys didn't follow me too far back. So Caldor fire, GIS, incident data. And now I want to have us all scroll down to the very bottom, and we're going to select the second from the last one. There's something funky about the last one that I forget what it is, but the second from the last one works better. Click on that. Nothing really changed. It's just, yeah, there was some kind of weird edits. But in here, we have two different zip files. One is a geodatabase and one is a perimeter zip. The perimeter zip is a shape file. The geodatabase will not go into ArcGIS Online. So we will not want to click that one and download it. We do want the perimeter data though. So this is what we'll do is we'll click on the perimeter data and it should automatically start a download. And it's not very big. I already did this today, so it's it's already in my system, but now I can look at my downloads and I can see it's there. So I'll go to that folder. If this is a little unclear, it might be, I don't know, tricky, but so here we got this Caldor fire. Don't do what I'm about to do. Hopefully you downloaded it, just the perimeter one, but I'm gonna create a new folder somewhere. I got a trash folder. I'm gonna put this over in my trash folder and go in there. That way I can control all, except for that. Oops. I'm going to delete. Oops. Dang it. Control all. I'm going to get rid of everything else because I want to show you something just so you know what we're working with. I just want this one in there. I'm going to unzip it right where it's at. So I'm going to extract all. You don't need to do this, by the way. You don't need to do this. I'm just want to show you what's inside of there is this. There's all these different peripheral files, but they have to be zipped up into one zip to be able to bring up onto ArcGIS Online. So this is what I mentioned earlier about how a shape file isn't just one file. It's a whole bunch of like index and projection and you name it, database files. There's all these different associated files that are in there. So ArcGIS Online doesn't know how to interpret if you just bring in the shapefile for example. It needs several different of these specifically the shape, the SBX, and the DBF file have to be there. And the projection sometimes. So anyhow, so you need to have this all zipped up. And what's nice about how it just came down from the Cal Fire is it is zipped up for us. So the next step is really easy. So we just go into the map here, click on add, search for layer, not in my content. It's going to go, oops, not my bad. Add layer from file. So click the add layer from file. This time we can choose a file. It should be in your downloads. I moved mine to the trash, so I can just take that zip file. You might have to navigate to your downloads and click open. And then import. And then you see this kind of blob covering up your area. We want to change the symbology of that right now because it's that solid color is not going to work for us. Just like we did with the county layers, we can go into location single symbol and click the options for location single symbol. Click on the symbol. We can give it a gray color or dark color, just like we did before. We can make the transparency of the center fairly high, and the outline will make it black with no transparency. Click OK. And so now you have an outline of the fire. So now that we have all of this in here, I'll kind of explain why I originally put this together. This is the end of Caldor Road. Let's see, right, Elmo Ranch. Okay, here. The end of Caldor Road is right about here. And I own property right, let's see, shoot. Oh, Caldor Road comes out. So this is Steely Ridge. Okay, my property is right at the point of this fire. It actually jumped onto my property and burned it in like 3 different places. I don't have any structures there, but my dad's right next door, and fire came right up to his house as well. And so when this fire got going, I went online and started searching frantically for any kind of real-time data, and nothing was real-time enough for me. So I threw together the map and published it, put it up on Facebook. Next thing I knew, like there was like 91,000 people that had accessed it. So it's one of the neat things about web mapping applications or web maps is that you can get it out there in a very big way that you couldn't in the past with with conventional mapping. And it could do it in near real time with, like, as the fire grew each day, I would like update with the new layers, and it wasn't like a super onerous process, but it was it kind of a high impact for not a massive amount of effort. There's a really neat thing about putting together data layers like this. One thing that I think I did and would have everyone else do right now that we're getting kind of into the a little bit more of the cartography stuff, is let's set the background a little bit different, because this colored background like this is great and dandy, but it's not ideal. We'll switch to the base map to, say, hybrid imagery. The reason for that is then if someone wanted to zoom in and see if where, like, say, how close the fire was to their house, they could see their house in the imagery or see the location. This, by the way, and we don't need to do this right now, is where you might adjust the visibility range of that burned area severity to not be visible when you zoomed into a certain level, so you could look underneath it, just for viewers' sake. Good. Right on. Let's save this again. And then, as Maggie noted in the comments, saved early, save often. And part of the reason why I really suggest saving is that we haven't done any major analysis yet, but if there's any time when something will crash on you, it is when there's analysis that's going on. And so we're going to jump into some of the cool little simple analysis tools. One of which is to filter our data. And the way we do that is we will, okay, I'm going to OK this on the side and click done, because if we don't click OK and done and we just back up, we'll lose things that we've changed. So we're back in our contents. I'm going to have a little sip. We need to filter out all of these structures, because if we wanted to say, I mentioned earlier the kind of the theme of like, we want to be able to support like people that need support. And so we want to subset the houses that were not damaged from the houses that were. And specifically, we want some of the houses that were damaged to some degree, where people will need help. If the houses are completely burned, they definitely need help, but they're not going to need their the distance and the location of their house relative to the office is not quite as important then, because, well, yeah, their houses are unfortunately gone. So anyhow, let's filter out specifically the DINS layer. So we have to go down and find the DINS layer. Let's drag it up to the top, all the way to the top. So the Caldor 21 DINS. And then, and you can see how it pops now even more because we put in that other shaded, the perimeter layer also. So you get a kind of good contrast. In conventionally in mapping, what you want, whatever is the thing of interest should be what pops out the most. You don't want to have like your most important, you don't want to bury the story kind of. So with this, let's filter, and we'll click on the filter option, which is right underneath the title. And we only want to see houses that are damage is, say, affected. We could pick either affected or minor, but I'm going to just go with affected for now. And then apply filter, and you'll see only the affected houses. So those are houses that are still there that they might need some help, but they are not destroyed. Now, if we wanted to just save this layer as it is, the same way I noted earlier with the air quality, if we wanted to, we could do a join with the county the county data would probably be the best. And the way you would do that is go into either analysis here. There's analysis is the little box. You could perform analysis on this now. And if you perform analysis when there's a filter applied, it will only conduct the analysis on the features that are showing. And so we could click feature. We could either do summarize data and join features to the county. We could also do data enrichment. And so we can click on enrichment right here. We have the DINS public view it's already recognized what we want to enrich it with. We'll select a variable that's available for enrichment. Unfortunately, landscape is not here anymore, but we might be interested in poverty. So we could select information about the poverty index for that given area. We're not going to actually run this, by the way, because if we did, then it's going to take 2 or 3 minutes, I found from practicing. You can show other poverty variables, but you can select any kind of variable. We could apply, but right now we would cancel. And normally we would just run analysis. We aren't going to do that right now because it doesn't show the credits, but if I showed the amount of credits that it would take to run, it'll describe that, but we don't have the layer selected. But regardless, it takes a few steps. But what would occur then is this table that is at the bottom. Oops, I'm going to back this up. Back it up again. Back it up again. This DINS, I'm going to look at the table now of the DINS data. This would then get an extra attribute column so that you get a new column or multiple new columns that would give you information about the economics or the poverty level of those given locations that they were just enriched with. And it would be a new layer that would only be the structures that you're looking at here. You follow that? So that would be the steps to do an enrichment. We don't need to take them again because it just takes time, and then there's not a ton of value in it right now. Next, though, we are going to go through the steps, what you would do for access to the local office. Another tool that we might use is analysis. We'll click on analysis under the DINS points again, the little box. You can also do it from the top. Feature analysis. And I think it's under proximity. So what you would do is find nearest or plan routes. I think the find nearest is the one that we would want to use right here. We'd have the DINS would be what we're looking for. We want to find the nearest location to the ANR offices. You don't want line distance, you want driving distance or trucking distance, one of the two. Or we could do driving time. Either way, it's going to be the same thing. What we'll do is we can set barriers if we want, but there's also use only current map extent, which is checked by default at the very bottom. This will also, we also want to include the route layers. That's important. We check that. Again, this process takes just a couple of minutes, but you can see just the DINS, the ANR locations, the driving distance. You could select barriers like state barriers or something like that, but we don't have any of that right now. But then we have the just include the route layer or include the map extent, and don't click run analysis. I'll show the credits this time because it will show credits of how much. It's only like, oh, see, it takes 28 credits to run this process, but I do know it's a 2-minute process, and much faster than that is we can go to the directions and grab on page 20, nearest ANR location to threatened structures, Control C. Skip out of this. We don't need to do an analysis. We can just leave that by going back to details and then click add, the drop down, search for layers, not in my content, but in ArcGIS Online, because I published it for everybody. You can clear that. And we can paste in what I had there, let's see, what's the nearest ANR facilities to threatened structures, and click enter, and it should show up. I published it when I first created this exercise some time ago. And then I just add in, click plus. So this is the results of that analysis. It takes the 2 minutes or 3 minutes or that's on a fairly quick machine too. Well, actually, it doesn't matter what speed machine it is. It's all done online. But even still, it might take some time. But this is the route layer, and then to each of the structures that are here. Good. So now we have a thematic map with an office that has some pop-up. By the way, if we go back, I'm just going to show you this, but we're not going to do it, but because it is something that is of interest. So we can go in here. We can click the little cluster, the 3 dots on the ANR locations. You can, under this, you could rename it to something more intuitive. Another thing that's important is you can configure the pop-ups. The pop-ups that come up, you can change, you can configure these attributes. So you can change the way the names are. If we clicked on, say, location, you can change what the alias is that pops up in the pop-up. You can tell it not to display them if you want. Yes, display, don't display, that kind of thing. So I'm going to cancel that just so you know that you can configure your pop-up. So if I click on this, then it would show it. I could tell it not to show the FID number, or I could put in something else there that's of interest. Or I can change the name of address to name of whatever other thing I want it to be. Good.
Sean.
Yes.
So we've done a big chunk of stuff from searching to data enrichment to analysis. And I just wanted to do a little check-in to see if anybody needs any of that repeated. But I want to make sure you have enough time to finish up. So
yeah. You're right on track with what I was just thinking, because perfect. I was cruising through that just so now we could take another 5-minute break or answer questions real quick. And does anybody have questions? I know there's a ton of them that are in here that have been being fielded by our.
So there was a request to do the add data again. There was a request to review the filtering again, but Genoa might have answered that. And there was a question about, credits. So, yeah, what do you guys want to do? Do you want Sean to kind of go through that whole tranche of steps again? Or is everybody now caught up?
I see where the add data one came in. That's good.
Yeah, that was the most recent. So maybe we do that one.
I can do that. I can just repeat that right now. So,
yeah. And there was Uvia says she was not seeing feature analysis was not an option for her. So that needs looking into too.
Oh, okay. See, once in a while that comes up. It's UVA's license is probably from an organization, whether it's Berkeley or elsewhere, that doesn't have feature analysis as an option. It's one suggestion is to check analysis at the top. And if it doesn't work there, then under the features, see if you have that analysis option there. But yeah, that.
Yeah, and if
is
you
the
don't have
licensing agent.
either, it's your administrators kind of put a limit on what people can do, right?
Mhm.
Probably because of credits. They're worried about credit use, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
So great. Let me show you how to add in that data that I just put in the nearest structure. So that brought in kind of two layers. One is a point. One is a which is unnecessary. One is the lines, the structure. So I would go through I'll show you how the steps are to bring it in one more time, and then I'll show you how you just actually bring it in. I mean, well, excuse me, how you would run the analysis to create it, and then skipping over that lag time of the analysis, how to bring it in. And this is how you would go up to analysis. You would go to feature layers. We go use proximity, and then find nearest. The first option is we would want to select the DINS layer. So the Caldor DINS. So we want to find out what the nearest of these is to the nearest ANR location. So it's the DINS to the nearest ANR location. We don't want line distance. We want drive time or drive distance. Similar. You don't have to worry about use traffic or any of those other options. That's probably why I usually use drive distance. And then we would scroll down. We'd give it a name, and we include the route layer. So we want to have the route layer is this, it would generate this line along the roads. And then normally we would click analysis, but instead we have on page 20, this little section on number 7, nearest ANR facility to threatened structure. So we copy that. Mine's still copied, I believe. And we'd go back to details at the top and the drop down. And we would do search for layers in ArcGIS Online. So we do the drop down for ArcGIS Online, and then we would paste that name there and click enter, and that'll bring up this. And then once you've clicked the plus sign on that, I'm not going to do it again because it's already in there, then it would appear in your map. Good. So Robert pointed out that one of the let's see, where was that at? A lot of times better to do it in a desktop because it's slow online. And I think that sometimes it varies too in its speed. So say there's a conference or someone's using a whole bunch of Esri's bandwidth, then it gets super slow, and sometimes it's quicker. But at least that's what it seems like to me. I've had it vary in the speed. But yeah. I know some folks are already on break. I'll plan on being back in like at 3:29. All right, let's get going again. So one of the things every time I give this workshop, I go back and I look at previous video footage or recordings of the last times we've done the workshops, and I look at ways that I can make it kind of run smoother. And what I find a lot is that we get down to the end and we don't have enough time to do a lot of the cool cartography stuff. So that's part of the reason why I've been having us do the symbology as we go. So then we get down here and then our map comes together really nicely without spending a whole bunch of time going from one layer to the next layer to the next layer, trying to like change the style so it looks good, because we already have a fairly good looking map now on the screen. At least that's my opinion. And And while we're at this, and I should have said this beforehand, save is probably it's something that's really important that you do all the time. Definitely before you do any kind of analysis, after you do analysis, well, anytime you get up and walk around, it doesn't hurt to save it. There's yeah, you know, if you jump out of the screen and you come back, then you can lose everything that you've done. So here we have, yeah, like I said, a thematic map that we could publish now and share to someone, anyone that we want. But it doesn't have a lot of the like the trappings of what you'd hope for in a full-fledged web mapping application with, say, legends and that sort of thing. So what we'd want to do is we could center this here, get it right in the middle of the screen. It's important that we get it nice and centered right now. That'll save us time later on. And then click save again, because then it'll show up in our web mapping application where it's positioned here. We don't have to come back and fiddle with it. And once it's saved, we can share this map. And the way we do that is we go up to the share option right here. And we could share it to everybody. I'm going to do it right now. There's nothing really confidential on here. There's some cases where you do want to restrict it. You don't want to have everybody looking at some types of data, but this is all public domain data anyways. It's fine. We'll share it to everybody. So, and our tags is part of what makes it discoverable for anyone that searches for it. Or you could select members of one of your groups. That's where those groups come in handy. And then once we're done with this, then you could embed it and get the code for that. We won't worry about that right now because we'll want to create a web app. I have to admit, I like that they updated the way that they've done their web apps here recently. It was not, they went through a phase where these web app options I thought they were worse before they got better again. There's tons of redundant ways that you can create web apps though. And web apps are essentially templates of formatting some kind of like something you could throw on a web page, or that could be a standalone website-esque sort of URL. But here, what we'll do is there's all these different options on here. There's you can do a web app builder that you can create like a more adaptable kind of trickier, I'd say not necessarily trickier, but a different kind of way of approaching your web app. But let's just go with the configurable apps, something basic. Basic's good. You have all these other ones in here. And I might mention too that I've kind of grown a little more fond of Experience Builder that is like this too. But what I like about Experience Builder is that it gives you tutorials for how to do the different steps. You have to search online for tutorials for the basic options here. But let's just go with basic and we'll stick with this for right now and create web app. Again, you're going to have to put in some kind of tag. In this case, it carried the tag over from the last one. I'm going to just put in practice 2 or 3 or 10 or something like that. And then you can put in summary and save folder. I'm going to put it in the training. Oh, it's a field app, ArcGIS training. You don't have a folder, it's fine. And we'll click done. So if everybody followed that, I saved it at the top center of my screen. Then I clicked share. I did it to everybody. And then it will take a second, but it will come up here in the web app. I'll show you a value of having this little cluster of dots at the top here in a second too, which is kind of nice. But even though there's kind of a couple ways that we could do this, actually we can do it right now. That little cluster of dots. See, this web app right here is based upon the web map that's underlying it. So this is a different file that we're creating right here, and it's just related to this web map that's in the background. we can't, if we want to make adjustments, like say configure the pop-ups, we can't do it from here. Or we want to change the zoom, we kind of can do that from here now with a new option. But if we want to do edits to the underlying data, we can click this cluster up here and go back to Map Viewer Classic. And what it'll do is it should bring up one of our, well, it didn't automatically go back to it, but we can go to our contents, the contents in our drop down. This is mostly info only, but you can do this. The last web map that you created should be the second from the top. So the map practice, in my case, I could click on that, the second from the top in your contents, and then open in Classic Viewer. And so I see it here. I don't like this zoom level or the pop-ups or whatever else symbology. I can click in and zoom in one more level if I wanted to. Oops, that I accidentally toggled too much. Save it again. And then I can go back to my instant app and I could save the draft of this. I could publish it. For now, we can always republish it, but publishing it creates it, saves it. Good. We don't need to launch it right now, but what we can do is we can refresh it after we've published it. And it's relating to the map, and see how it's better framed now because it was zoomed in a little bit more. That makes sense? If you didn't do all that, that's like not necessary, but it's just kind of what it's nice to have this here underline where we can make the edits, the zoom and so forth, and then come back and then it appears right here. And that's found through the cluster of dots at the top. But we don't need that now. Good. Now let's configure a web mapping application. So there's tons of these options. So it's kind of like choose your own adventure a lot of the time. And sometimes it comes down to creativity of what you want to do. There is one thing I like about Basic though, is that it has some get started options that will lead you through the steps that you want to do. So one thing I like to do, I don't know why I can't stand this Express thing at the top. I turn off Express. It says that it helps like narrow you down to the things you need to do, but it stops you from doing things you want to do sometimes. So it's like slightly annoying, but because it takes away some of your options, like you can change your map view in the background. You get to see now about your themes and layouts. If you want to change your icons, so say your theme, I could change it from light to dark or dark to light. I can leave it that way. And then I'll go back. So there's so that's the back option. I can change it. I can add a logo. So I could upload a logo and that would put it at the top of the map here. And so that end up in your final product. It's kind of neat. And I'll go back. You can do your position manager. This is the way that you can also adjust your some of your options here. So what I have to actually, let's see, I can do my top left. Let's see. Shoot, I'm trying to adjust. I guess my screen is too tight here. I'm trying to grab the edge of this to drag it over. So I can do my home button. I can adjust that to the top right instead, and it moves over to the top right. Or my zoom control, maybe I want that. Sometimes the zoom control won't move. I don't know why. It just always wants to be at the top left, but you can adjust some of the positions of your of these functions here. Not super important, but it's nice to know that there are there. Next is the getting started. It has all these various options here that are handy. You can skip the Express. That's just refers to that top thing there. There's the navigation boundary though, that is kind of neat. You can click on that and then click options. It just tells you about what I'm going to tell you right now. If you want to have a navigation boundary, you can check that and then configure. And it lets you set the the boundary of your frame. So what your area of focus is. Actually, I wanted to go out past the ANR facility. Good. So that allows you to find addresses or places and search and so forth, and then confirm. Good. So you can add in other things in here that you might be interested in, like a scale bar and your scroll, you name it, that stuff's available there. You can go down, click on the, there's modify and shared search. Those are options, but let's go back to get started. Those are also redundantly included here. You can, and then once you have your map set up, there's sometimes we'll want to, let's see, you have to change the title elsewhere. But and that would be up here. Map. Oh, we'll need let's see, we got the interactivity. Sorry, looking for, they have changed this slightly. You just resave your underlying map because it was called Map Practice 4. You'd save it with a different name, so the title across the top of your map is cleaner. Another reason why we'd be back here, we could just change the name of the map when you actually created it and published it. And we have all these other themes and sharing options, but specifically, let's go to the option of share. Good. Publish is app, and that publishing happens. Shoot, where's it at? It's so funny that I just did this. Let's see, share. Go to option. The box is over the top of it. Publish. There you go. Oh, it was underneath my zoom. That's why I couldn't see it. I didn't have a zoom on earlier. And then I confirm and publish this. Your changes have been saved, and then we launch it. And that's what our website is going to look like. Oh, too much zoom. We can adjust that. The way we adjust that is we go back here. We jump out one level, move it over just a teeny bit, save it again. See why I showed you to how to get there and put that, like bring up that map underneath. We go back to this, publish it again. You have to save it and then publish it one more time. And then launch it again. And this time it should be framed better. There we go. And then we have our web map. Good. And you can add, and depending on the template you choose, you can have all kinds of different things in there, titles, you name it, that would be included. But this is one of the reasons why I created a simple web map like this. This was set to share with anyone. This URL right here can be emailed to anybody, or here, oh, those are some of our trains. Oh, it's on the other tab. Or if you have a site builder, like we have our ArcGIS website, I could put it in as an iframe in your web development tool. I'm updating that asset with the map that I just created. You're not able to do this, by the way. This is show and tell. Sorry, I jumped ahead on that so quickly. So I just copied the URL from the published map from here. And what I'm doing that you can't, so don't worry about it, is I put it inside of our site builder. And what site builder? Did I accidentally click out of it? Must have. Oh, here it is. And then view current. And so you'll see this come up in our ArcGIS website then is a training map example that has that map frame in there. Good. So that's one of the uses for many of you UCNR people, if not everyone else that uses maybe other web development tools. That's yeah, it's a nice little feature that you can add into your website or otherwise. Good. Now, I wanted to make sure that I had enough time for questions and also a little bit of time for you to play. And I wanted to leave this little teeny bit of time at the end. And I mentioned earlier that I would do this, is show you one tool that we can use now, the next generation of the web map viewer that we've been working within to develop our web map. And I'll show you what that looks like and to translate it a little bit to what we just used. It's very similar. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions? Because this was the meat of what we've traditionally done in the workshop. Good. Checking the chat. There's so many map layers. How do we know what they are? How many map layers? That is a good question. There is, like I said, hundreds of thousands of map layers. It's kind of like I'd compare it to like Google. You just Google and then bring it in and turn it on and off. And here, I'll show you an example of that. Let's do that now with the other map viewer that we're talking about. So how do you add a dynamic file? If you're referring to a dynamic web file, like the example would be the air quality file, just the way that we did it. However, there is a spot in the directions. In fact, I'll show it to you. Like I said, there's more information that we wish that we could provide. Let's see, exercise. It says under tabular data enrichment, tabular data. Okay, no. Okay, there is a way to bring tabular data in from Google Sheets, and I thought I had that as an optional one on here, but it might not be in here. It might be down at the bottom, or we might have taken it out because it was just too much extra text. If you, oh, by the way, that's a great, that actually is a great lead into something that I kind of neglected to mention earlier. ArcGIS has office hours on Mondays and Tuesday afternoons. So more complex kind of questions like that can be answered there. The way you do that is, oh, Maggie just put it in the chat. Awesome. So our office hours, that's what those are for. It is for questions that are kind of like a little more tricky of how you might link, say, your web map like this to an underlying spreadsheet that you have in Google Drive. It's for having it be like accessible and kind of real time. Or it could be also a collection of data that came from, say, a mobile data collection tool like field maps. And that's kind of dynamic, and then it's always updated too as well there. Good. So let's do this. We'll go back, and we're in the web app here. This is in the configurable app. I'm going to close out a couple of things, including the chat, so I can see what I'm doing here, and just show you is a very brief, just for a few minutes, the new tool that is being pushed, and it's just, like I said, just out of beta, that is pretty slick. I like it a lot. And so if you haven't already done it, you can click this, bring up your classic viewer like I did. I've already done it. Once that classic viewer is up, you'll have to then back out and into your content, and then open your map that you just created. The one that says web map, you'll click on that. I'm going to close my other one since I already did this. So you bring up that web map, and then we will click on it. It'll open up by default in Classic Viewer. But that doesn't mean we have to stick with that. We can also click up here and open in Map Viewer now, once we're in here. So if you give you a second to catch up there, we can open in Map Viewer. And this is the new layout of putting in your data. I have to move my zoom so I can see it better. Shift this whole thing up. Good. Oh, dang it. I didn't want to jerk to full screen. There we go. So in here, it's the same thing. It looks similar. Well, not the same thing. The layout's different, but it's the same map, but there's just different ways of adjusting it. The differences is that you add your data with this column of the stack of options on the side. It's a little bit confusing sometimes because you can add data from a layer on the plus sign, but you have to add data from online. You have to do it through the in a different spot, which would you go down in the stack and then you go down to the bottom of this the layers, and then you add data from browse layers. So a little bit different way of adding data. So there's the top one. Well, I guess you can browse layers here too. It'll give you an option here, just like we searched for, but with the tabs on the side. And you can have the options of my content, favorites, just like everything else that we had there. That's the way that we included those. So let's so you want, like I said, if you wanted some kind of data that was I don't know, any different type of layer, and I'm trying to think of something that would be of interest, but I can search ArcGIS online. And you said, what data layers do you want? I might say, I don't know, forest. I'm just going with just some keyword search, and I can look down through here. Here's the USA forest type. I'm just going to click on this, and to know what layers you want, you sometimes, well, it doesn't tell me much about it. Or like, so you'd need to read about it to see what you wanted, or get on Google too. There's a lot of information that's shared there of different types of data. And then you know what keyword search to search for here. So anyways, this is when you have the layers in here, this is like your contents pane under the stack here. Once we click on something, and it's I don't like this about it. It's kind of hard to see, like it stretches down quite a ways. So yeah, it's not quite as clean on the contents pane. But say, where's the DINS layer? Here it is. I click on this and it gives me the options for it on the right-hand side. So this is kind of like the overview. And then the right-hand side is is where you change the symbology. So you could edit the layer style there. For the options that we picked before, but they previously popped up on the left side, or I can just close out of that. I could go to the ANR locations, click on that. It'll give up the properties. I can also click on the drop down and on the 3 dots, and it shows show properties, show table, and zoom to. So we got those options there. But by clicking it, by default, it brings up properties. This is brand new as of July, is that now it has, well, no, analysis. Yes. It has analysis tools that have just recently been added to it. And so they're a little bit limited and hard to find compared to the other ones, but they do have the tools that are all the same as what you have over there, minus like 2 tools, at least per what it says online. So this is the new environment that is being pushed. And then finally, we can look at the tables of different data. Oops, sometimes you have to look at the table through it here. But wait a minute, you can add in charts, which is nice. Legend, and ultimately there's the map properties. But down at the bottom, this is where you create your instant app, which is almost exactly what we were just working in. So if I click on instant app, it will bring up this variety of this map that we are just working on, that we can click basic, look familiar, right? We could choose this and we'd have to publish it. And then it brings you to the same thing we just worked through. Alternatively, said they have lots of like kind of choose your adventure pass. You can do experience builder. This is the one I said that I kind of prefer. And the reason for that is if I clicked on, and this is the last thing I'll show you, and then I'll like, it will be good for the day. If I created a blank map of this, and what I like about, and see, it already has it positioned down in there. And you can stretch that positioning and make the frame whatever in different, stretch it and whatever. But what you can do on the bottom left hand corner, there's a little help and show help guide, and it starts a tour of things that you could do within that. And that's one of the reasons I like Experience Builder a little bit better right now. If you don't already know what you're doing. And the thing is there's all these different kinds of templates too that you could work with. So there's the blank, the foldable, you name it, tons of them. And you can just like look, kind of peruse them on your own time. But with that, I think that we have come down to a good spot. Does everybody feel comfortable that they could go through, create a map either here or alternatively in the traditional map viewer like this, and then publish it, share it, and put it up into a map like this, and then this URL is good to go. You can set it on to anybody that you would like. Great. And then there's also the click and pop-up options that I probably would turn off if I was actually going to publish this and really kind of vet it. One thing is just like a kind of a journal article or something. You usually got to kind of kick the tires, have someone else look over it with fresh eyes to see if there's something that's not quite right. But yeah. So any questions? One thing, Ben will be let's see. So Ben already posted in the chat the evaluation link. He'll also send out an email to everybody to please fill that out. We really do appreciate it. It's not just that we try to improve the workshops all the time, but we also like to keep records that we're hopefully doing a good job, and we can report that for our program, show the impacts and outcomes of what we're doing. And also, remember there's the office hours, and I'm going to look at the chat again to make sure that there's nothing otherwise new. Good. And any questions, and please feel free to, you can play with that data to your heart's content. There's all those different options. Like I said, you can see where you can try the variations, either the traditional map viewer, you can do it in the new map viewer, play with that a little bit. And so it's not, and practice with some of the different types of web mapping applications. One last thing too that I might mention, there's other trainings coming up. We have the Jupyter notebooks in November. Dr. Andy Lyons is teaching a number of our workshops that are awesome. And we have story maps also coming up later in December. Good. And we keep updating these as the seasons go by. Thank you all for coming on this Friday afternoon. I really do. I appreciate it. I like doing this. This is neat.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys. You can all drop off and have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah.
And, please be in touch.
And I am going to stop recording right now.